The silence in this conference room is suffocating. It's the kind of quiet that only exists in expensive Boston law offices, thick with the smell of polished mahogany and old dead money. The attorney, a man I've never met but who represents the real lawyers, has just finished speaking. I am proud for you to utter in conclusion all assets, including the primary residence and associated accounts, are hereby frozen as collateral against the federal civil fraud claim. My mother, Diana, makes a small, strangled sound like a dying bird. My father, Frank, just stares at the wood grain of the table, his face a waxy pale gray. He seems to have shrunk inside his expensive suit. But my brother, Leo, my brilliant, charismatic, golden brother, he's vibrating. He looks like a kettle about to explode. You, he finally screams, slamming both palms flat on the table. The sound is a gunshot in the still room. You did this. This is a joke. You can't do this, Olivia. That's our house. Our house. I let that word "our" hang in the air. I let it twist and sour. I look at my father, the coward. I look at my mother, the enabler. Finally, I lock eyes with Leo. My voice, when I speak, is so cold it surprises even me. You're wrong, Leo. It was Grandma's house. You just lived in it. It's the same thing. You're just playing with words. He sputters, his face a blotchy, furious red. No, I lean forward, savoring this. It's not. The same thing as the lie you all told yourselves when you and Mom found that shady lawyer to forge a power of attorney, when you all conspired to steal her assets to fund your art career. You just made one tiny, fatal mistake. What? Kisses. You did it while I was at Boston University writing my doctoral dissertation. I paused, letting him feel the hook. On forensic accounting and fraud examination, the color doesn't just drain from his face, it plummets. Checkmate. I was always the boring daughter. In our image-obsessed Boston family, that was worse than a crime. My brother, Leo. Leo was the artist. He was the soul. He was the creative spirit, as our mother Diana loved to say. From the moment he painted some genius smudge at age 10, he was the project. He was their golden boy. He dropped out of college mass art because it was stifling his genius. And he'd been living at home ever since, blowing through their money on his projects. What projects? A music album no one bought, an immersive art gallery in a rented warehouse that closed in a week. And now, an art film. Me? I was math. I was the quiet, stable, predictable Olivia. I was the one who got a full academic scholarship to Boston University. While Leo was holding creative salons in the living room, I was upstairs, in my old bedroom, studying. I chose my major for a reason. Forensic accounting. Accounting is the language of business. Forensic accounting is the language of business lies. It's the art of finding the truth in the places people try to bury it. It's fraud detection. It's following the money, following the numbers, which, unlike people, never lie. It wasn't just a major, it was my quiet rebellion. In a house built on illusion and creative nonsense, I clung to figures, to facts, to the hard, provable truth. For the last 6 years, I'd been working on my PhD. My topic, the use of forged conveyance instruments in elder real estate fraud. It sounds dry, doesn't it? But to me, it was poetry. It was a detective novel written in bank statements and notary ledgers. I lived on a grad student's stipend and a TA's salary. I didn't ask my parents for a dime. I was the ghost in their house. Oh, Olivia's home? I didn't even notice. My mother would say to guests before turning the spotlight back to Leo. My grandmother, my father's mother, was different. She was the only one who saw me. She was an old school broad who made a fortune in Back Bay real estate before it was fashionable. She despised Leo's artistic fluff and my father's alcoholic complacency. She saw the weakness in her son, Frank. Your father has champagne for a spine, kid, she told me once, and your brother has air for a brain. You're the only one with substance. When she died 2 years ago, she left the house, the beautiful historic brownstone in Brookline we all lived in a trust. She left it to me. With one condition. My parents could live there, rent-free, for the rest of their lives, but they could not sell it or borrow against it. The house was my future, my inheritance, or so I thought. For the last 8 months, while I was in the bunker finishing my dissertation, I'd been so deep in my work I barely noticed what was happening downstairs. The quiet meetings with Leo's friends, Leo's new slick business manager. My parents' trips to a new estate lawyer. I ignored it. I was focused on my defense. I was going to be Dr. Olivia. I was going to finish, get a job at a major firm, and finally move out of that house of lies. I thought my education was my ticket out. I had no idea it was actually my only weapon. While I was writing about the theory of fraud, they were committing it right under my nose. While I was studying how criminals forge signatures, they must have been practicing. They looked at me, boring Olivia, buried in my books in the attic, and thought I was just a bookworm. They thought I was too lost in my abstract theories to see the real world. They didn't understand. To become an expert in something, you have to live it. And I lived and breathed fraud detection. I saw the patterns in my sleep. And they, the idiots, decided to rip off the one person in the world who was literally trained to catch them. In our family, power was a currency, and my brother Leo was the only one allowed to spend it. My parents, Frank and Diana, were his personal bank, happily funding his every whim. Leo is a masterpiece of narcissism, sculpted his entire life by my parents. He's not just talented, he's a genius, or so they say. What's his genius in? No one knows. It changes. At 20, it was conceptual sculpture. He welded 3 rusty bikes together and called it the cycle. At 22, it was immersive music. He rented a studio on my dad's dime and played the same chord for hours, calling it a soundscape. Now at 26, he's a filmmaker. His new project is an art film. It's a silent, black and white video about, I think, urban alienation, which is just 40 minutes of him filming rain on the coffee shop window. Leo has this toxic, consuming charm. He walks into a room and all eyes are on him. He talks as if every word is a revelation. He doesn't ask for money. He offers an investment opportunity in his vision. He isn't lazy. He's in a gestation period. To him, I'm not a person. I'm a function. I'm the boring, gray, predictable Olivia. I'm the one who gets things done. I'm the one on a scholarship because in his words, I have no imagination for anything else. He doesn't hate me. He disdains me. I'm his opposite, and my quiet competence makes his showy genius look cheap. So, to him, I just don't exist. But the real villains are my parents, because Leo was just the monster they created. My father, Frank, is a walking case study in cowardice. He's the man who was supposed to be the steward of his mother's legacy, her house, her money, but he's weak. He's terrified of disappointing Diana. He's terrified that Leo's failure will reflect on him. He knows what they're doing is wrong. I see it in the way he won't meet my eyes, in the way he pours his second glass of wine a little too quickly at 5:30 p.m. He hides behind euphemisms. They're not stealing. They're borrowing. They're not committing fraud. They're creatively managing assets. Leo's about to have his breakthrough, Livy. He told me one night when I caught him in the kitchen, drunk and sentimental. This film, it's going to change everything. We'll pay it all back. It's just a temporary measure. You understand. I just looked at him. Grandma's will forbade a loan against the house, Dad. It's illegal. He flinched. Don't use that word. It's complicated. Your mother, she just wants what's best for your brother. And you're already set. You've always been so self-sufficient. You don't need our help. Not like he does. Self-sufficient. The code word for abandoned. And then, my mother, Diana, she is the engine. She is the director of this pathetic play. Diana is a woman who desperately wanted to be someone else. She married into money, or rather, her mother-in-law's money, and has spent her whole life trying to sculpt her son into a masterpiece she can show off. My quiet, academic career was a personal affront to her. What are you going to do with that thing? She once asked me about my PhD. Sit in a dusty office and count other people's numbers. God, Olivia, where is your passion? You're just like your father's mother, practical to a fault. She adores Leo because he's a blank canvas for her ambitions. She's the one who found the Salini estate lawyer. She's the one who convinced Frank that Grandma would have wanted Leo to succeed. She's the one who engineered the entire scheme. I'd see her in action. I'd come downstairs, and the three of them would be in the living room. Leo, splayed dramatically on the floor, pontificating about the purity of the shot in his film. My parents, on the couch like a rapt audience, sipping wine that my inheritance was paying for. Olivia, darling Diana would say, noticing me, her voice dripping a fake sweetness. Join us. Leo is just telling us about his film. It's so exhilarating. Not like your boring old books, is it? I just stand in the doorway. I have to work, I'd say. Leo would snort. Party's over. The fun killer's here. Leo, don't be like that, Diana would say, but she'd be laughing. Your sister's just different. She doesn't understand art. Not everyone has an imagination. They were a perfect toxic ecosystem. Leo, the parasite. My father, the host you'd allow himself to be infected. And my mother, the virus that started it all. They were living in their cozy world of illusion, built on stolen money, and they thought that I, boring Olivia, would never notice a thing. It was the most important day of my academic life, my doctoral defense. This isn't just a final exam, it's a trial by fire. It's 6 years of research, 400 pages of original findings, all culminating in a 2-hour interrogation by a committee of 5 senior professors, all of whom were experts in your field and looking for a single flaw in your logic. It's the academic equivalent of climbing Mount Everest, and I was about to plant my flag. I was the only PhD candidate in the entire finance department at Boston University receiving a nomination for distinction. This was a huge deal. I'd sent my family an invitation months ago. I emailed them. I texted them the week before. 3 p.m., Friday, room 412. It would mean a lot if you were there. Wouldn't miss it for the world, honey, my dad had said. We're so proud. On Friday, at 2:30 p.m., I stood in the hallway outside the defense room, dressed in my only good suit. I smoothed my lapels, my heart hammering. I texted my mom, starting soon. Hope you can make it. No reply. At 3 p.m., my committee chairman, Dr. Graves, nodded at me. Are they coming, Olivia? They might be running late, I stammered, my face burning. We can't wait, he said, not unkindly. I walked in. For 2.5 hours, they tore me apart. They questioned my methodology, my data, my conclusions. I stood my ground. I defended my research. I knew my work was flawless. At 5:30 p.m., they asked me to step outside. 5 minutes later, they called me back in. Dr. Graves stood up. He was smiling. Please be the first to join me in congratulating Dr. Olivia. With distinction, the room applauded. I almost burst into tears, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washing over me. I had done it. I stumbled out into the hallway, my brain buzzing, my hands shaking. I pulled out my phone. Nothing. Not a single text. Not a missed call. I called my mom. Voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. I called Leo. The call went through. He picked up on the third ring. What? He snapped. his voice barely audible over a cacophony of loud, pretentious orchestral music. Leo, where are you guys? I passed. I'm Dr. Olivia. Oh, Jesus, is that today? He said, annoyed. We're at the premiere, Olivia. What do you think? It's my big night. God, look, we can't talk. The Q&A is about to start. Try to be happy for me for a change. He hung up. I just stood there in the empty university hallway, in my suit, holding my phone. They had forgotten. They had skipped the single most important moment of my 10-year academic career for a 40-minute movie about rain. I went home. The house was empty. At 10 p.m., they stumbled in, drunk on cheap champagne and self-congratulation. Oh, Olivia, darling, my mother slurred, throwing her arms open. You're home. Did you hear? Leo's film was a triumph. A triumph. Everyone said he's a genius. My defense was today, I said, my voice dead. What? Oh, that. How did your little test go, honey? My father said, fumbling with his coat. I passed, with distinction. I'm a doctor now. Oh, wonderful, my mother said, not even looking at me, already heading for the wine fridge. We must celebrate. They forced me to sit at the kitchen table while they celebrated me. The celebration consisted of them forcing me to watch blurry videos of Leo's premiere on their phones, while they dissected every brilliant frame. And now, for the real toast, my father said finally, his eyes glassy. He and my mother shared a proud, secretive look. We have an announcement, Deanna said, beaming at Leo. As you know, your father and I have always believed in investing in talent and in art. Mom, Dad, you're embarrassing me, Leo said, though he was clearly eating it up. In light of the obvious genius of Leo's work. My father continued, we've decided to make it official. We've established a formal arts foundation for him to fund his future projects. We've secured his first round of seed funding. How much? I asked, though I already felt the cold dread creeping up my spine. $250,000, my mother announced, her arms in the air. My blood ran cold. $250,000. Where did you get $250,000? You don't have that. My father cleared his throat. Well, that's the best part. We're just leveraging an asset. We took out a small loan against the house. Against the house. The house my grandmother left to me. The house they were legally forbidden from touching. You. What? I whispered. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Olivia, my mother said, patting my hand. It's just business. It's a reverse mortgage. A newfangled thing. It's all perfectly above board. A reverse mortgage, I said, the words of my own dissertation echoing in my head, is for people over 62. You're 58, and it's only for the owner of the property, which isn't you. Oh, it's just legal mumbo-jumbo, my father said, waving his hand, clearly getting agitated. Our new lawyer handled it all. It turns out Grandma's trust wasn't as ironclad as she thought. A new power of attorney. It's all sorted. They hadn't just borrowed. They had found a crooked lawyer. They had forged documents. They had committed fraud. They had just confessed to the exact crime I was the world's newest expert on. Don't look so sour, Olivia, my mother said, her voice turning sharp. This is good news. It's for the family. And besides, you're all set. You're a doctor now. You'll go get some high-paying, boring job and buy your own house. You're the smart one, right? You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. They had stolen my inheritance, my grandmother's legacy, and given it to him, and they'd done it on the night of my greatest achievement, all while telling me to my face that I didn't matter. I just nodded. I stood up from the table. You're right, Mom. I am the smart one. I went upstairs. Not to my bed. To my desk. And I opened a new file on my computer. Case study. The Franklin Trust. My defense was over. My real work was just beginning. The secret weapon wasn't a document I found in a dusty attic. It wasn't a last-minute, tearful confession from a guilty relative. My secret weapon was my education. It was the 6 years I spent in a library carrel. It was the 400-page dissertation I just defended. And most importantly, it was the man who had chaired my defense committee, Dr. Alan Graves. To the university, he's Professor Graves, a semi-retired academic. To me, he was my mentor. And to the United States Department of Justice, he was the man who for 30 years ran the FBI's Economic Crimes Division for the New England Field Office. Dr. Graves wasn't just a forensic accountant. He was a bloodhound. He was the man the government sent in when hedge funds collapsed, when CEOs were caught cooking the books, when politicians were taking kickbacks. He didn't just teach fraud examination. I had written the book on it. Literally. The textbook I'd used as a first-year student had his face on the back cover. When I'd first proposed my dissertation topic, he'd looked at me over his glasses. Elder fraud, huh? A lot of students find that dry. Why? Because, I'd replied, it's not just about numbers. It's about betrayal. It's the perfect crime, hidden in plain sight, wrapped in family and love. He'd smiled then, a rare, thin smile. You'll do, he'd said. You're a cynic, that's good. An accountant who isn't a cynic is just a bookkeeper. He became my mentor, my advocate, the closest thing to a father I had in a decade. The night they confessed, the night of my celebration, I didn't sleep. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and applied my entire PhD to my own family. A reverse mortgage, all sorted out with a new power of attorney. That sentence was my smoking gun. My grandmother's trust, which I'd read 100 times, was a fortress. It specifically forbade any loan, any lien, any leveraging of the property. The only way to bypass it would be to prove the trustee me was incompetent, or I to produce a new superseding legal document. At 7 a.m., I was at the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds. I wasn't a daughter, I was a researcher. I pulled the property records from my grandmother's house, and there it was, filed 8 weeks prior, a quitclaim deed, transferring the property out of the trust and into a new holding company. The holding company was named Leo Arts, LLC. The document was signed by my father, Frank, as executor, and it was co-signed by me, Olivia, my last name, trustee, my signature. Only. It wasn't. It was a forgery, and it was a bad one. They had clearly traced it from a college form or a bank card. The I wasn't dotted the way I do it. The O was too perfect. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with a cold, terrifying rage. This wasn't just a loan. This was a full-blown, multi-step, premeditated criminal conspiracy. They created a shell company. They'd forged my signature on a deed transfer. Then they'd taken that fraudulent deed to a bank, a shady, high-risk lender, no doubt, and secured the $250,000 against a property that wasn't theirs. I took pictures of everything. The deed, the notary stamp who was probably in on it, the LLC filing, which listed Leo as CEO. I didn't go home. I went to Dr. Graves' office. I walked in at 9 a.m. I hadn't slept. I probably looked insane. Dr. Olivia, he said, smiling. Here to celebrate? No, sir, I said. I laid the photos on his desk. I'm here to file a new case study. It's my family. He was silent as he looked at the pictures. He put on his reading glasses. He read the deed. He looked at the signature. Then he looked at me. His face was no longer that of a kind professor. It was the face of the FBI. They just confessed to you, he asked, his voice flat. They bragged about it, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. They did it to fund my brother's art film. On the night I passed my defense, he just stared at the desk. I watched him make the transition from academic to predator. Well, doctor, he said, his voice a low growl. Your dissertation was on theory. This is practice. The work you've done, it's a slam dunk. Bank fraud, wire fraud since the money was transferred. Forgery, conspiracy. What do I do? I asked. You? He looked up, his eyes sharp. You do nothing. You go home. You act sour. You act disappointed. You be the boring daughter. You let them think they've won. Me? I'm making a phone call. I haven't talked to my friends at the U.S. Attorney's Office in a while. They love cases like this, especially when the evidence is handed to them on a silver platter by the foremost expert in the field. He picked up the phone. Dr. Graves, I said. They're not just taking the case, Olivia, he said, his hand on the receiver. I'm going to make sure your dissertation is admitted as expert testimony. This isn't just revenge, kid. This is your first professional takedown. Now go. You've got work to do, or rather, you've got them to watch. I walked out of his office. They thought I was a bookworm. They had no idea I was the one writing the book on them. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life, not because I was sad, but because I had to act. Heard Dr. Grace's instructions. I went home, and I became the ghost they always wanted me to be. I was the sullen, disappointed daughter. I ate my meals in my room. I mumbled fine when they asked me how I was. I just gave up. And, oh, how they loved it. My apparent defeat was the final, triumphant validation of their new life. It was the confirmation that their investment was the right one. The $250,000 hit their Leo Arts LLC bank account, and the floodgates opened. It was a grotesque performance of newfound wealth. Leo was suddenly a visionary director. He didn't just rent a camera. He bought a $60,000 Arri Alexa camera. He hired a crew of other art school dropouts, paying them ridiculous day rates to film More Rain. He bought a vintage sports car, a classic 1970s Mercedes, because he needed to feel the right aesthetic when he drove to get coffee. My mother, Diana, was in heaven. She was the matron of the arts. She hosted salons in our, well, my living room. She had the entire downstairs redecorated in a hideous, cold, modern art style that clashed with the home's historic Bostonian charm. She was throwing dinner parties for Leo's new, equally shallow art world. Friends, all of them toasting his genius with champagne. My grandmother's money had paid for. My father, Frank, he just drank. He was happier. I'll give him that. He was no longer the guilty, anxious drunk. He was a proud, celebratory drunk. He'd clap Leo on the back and talk about vision and legacy, all the while spending money that wasn't his. They didn't just ignore me. They pitied me. She's taking it hard. I heard my mother whisper to my father one night, when they thought I was asleep. Her little PhD, it just doesn't compare to real success. She'll get over it. She just needs to accept that Leo is the star. I let them think it. I let them build their house of cards as high as it would go. Meanwhile, I was meeting with Dr. Graves twice a week. Not as a student, but as a colleague. We weren't in his office. We were in a loaner conference room at the U.S. Attorney's office downtown. My dissertation wasn't just testimony. It became the roadmap for the federal case. We mapped out the wire transfers. We subpoenaed the crooked lawyer's records. We got the bank's internal notes. It was, as Dr. Graves put it, a filet mignon of a fraud case, and you've served it to them on a platter. The plan wasn't just to arrest them. That would be messy, and they might make bail. The plan was to annihilate them. The U.S. attorney is filing a civil forfeiture claim alongside the criminal charges, Dr. Graves explained to me, a predatory glint in his eye. We're not just going for jail time, Olivia. We're going for the assets. We're going to freeze everything they touched, based on your evidence. So, how do we do it? I asked. We don't. The bank does. The bank they defrauded, they're now cooperating witnesses. A crisp, expensive-looking letter from a high-rise law firm. It's just some boring bank stuff, my mother had said, tossing the letter on the counter. They need us to sign the final disbursement papers. Leo, you must come. You're the CEO, after all. Leo had groaned. Why do I have to do the boring part? And Olivia, my father said, trying to be inclusive, why don't you come along? You're the numbers person. You can read the fine print. The condescension was so thick I could have choked on it. Sure, Dad, I said, my voice flat. I'll come. So this morning, we all got into Leo's new Mercedes. My father in the passenger seat, my mother and Leo in the back, brainstorming. I'm sorry, there wasn't room for me. They had a wardrobe for a film shoot in the back seat. I took the T. I arrived at the office building first. I went to the 34th floor. I didn't go to the reception area. I was met by a paralegal who ushered me into a small side room. Dr. Graves was already there, along with two men in dark suits who didn't smile. The assistant U.S. attorneys. They're on their way up, one of the AUSAs said, looking at his phone. You ready, doctor? I just nodded. I took the bound copy of my dissertation, the one I'd had printed just for this occasion, and followed them. We walked into the main conference room, the one with the panoramic view of the Boston Harbor, and took our seats on one side of the massive mahogany table. A moment later, the door opened. My family walked in, laughing about some brilliant idea Leo just had. My father saw me first. He just looked confused. Olivia, why are you on that side of the table? Leo saw the men in suits. Who are these guys? I thought this was just a signing. My mother saw my face. And for the first time, she saw the truth. Her smile froze. The door clicked shut behind them. The trap was set. The door clicked shut. My family stood frozen, a perfect tableau of sudden dawning horror. Olivia, why are you on that side of the table? My father repeated, his voice a confused mumble. My mother, Diana, looked at the stern-faced men, then at me, then back. Frank, what is this? Who are these people? I thought this was just a signing. Leo snapped, his voice high. He was used to being the center of attention. Now, he was just a confused extra. This isn't our lawyer. One of the men, the one at the head of the table, didn't stand. He simply placed his hands flat on the polished wood. Please, take a seat, Mr. My last name, Mrs. My last name. Mr. Leo, my last name. His voice was flat, calm, and held absolute authority. My name is Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark D'Angelo. And no, Mr. Leo, this is not a signing. They didn't sit. They just stared. We're here today, Mr. D'Angelo continued, to discuss a federal criminal complaint filed this morning. Case number 125, CR 10144. The complaint alleges 3 counts: conspiracy to commit bank fraud, wire fraud, and forgery of a trust instrument. My mother let out a small, sharp gasp. My father visibly swayed, grabbing the back of a chair for support. Bank fraud. My father stammered. That's ridiculous. This is a family matter. It's a misunderstanding about a loan. A misunderstanding, the AUSA said, raising an eyebrow. Our evidence shows a coordinated, multi-step conspiracy to create a shell LLC, forge the signature of a trustee, fraudulently transfer a deed, and then use that stolen deed to secure a $250,000 loan. That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. My last name. That's a felony. You can't prove that. Leo burst out, his face pale and sweaty. It's all legal mumbo-jumbo. Actually, Mr. D'Angelo said, a thin smile on his face. We can. The evidence is frankly overwhelming. It was handed to us, which brings us to our expert witness, who was kind enough to build our entire case for us. He gestured, not to me, but to Dr. Graves. Dr. Graves nodded. Thank you, Mark. As you all know, I'm a professor at Boston University. What you don't know is that for the last 3 months, I've been acting as a special consultant to the U.S. Attorney's Office, alongside my top doctoral student. He turned and gestured to me. Dr. Olivia, my last name. This was it. I picked up the heavy leather-bound copy of my dissertation from my lap. I stood up, walked to the table, and placed it in front of my father with a solid, definitive thud. The title, embossed in gold foil, gleamed under the conference room lights. Forged conveyance instruments in elder real estate fraud. A forensic analysis. My dissertation, I said, my voice clear and cold. The one you skipped. My father stared at the cover. He didn't get it, but my mother did. Her face crumpled. Olivia, she whispered, her voice cracking. No, you wouldn't. You bitch. Leo screamed, finally understanding. He lunged at me, his face purple with rage. You did this! You set us up! Before he'd taken 2 steps, the door behind him opened and a U.S. Marshal stepped in, putting a heavy hand on Leo's chest. Sit down. Leo collapsed into a chair, his genius evaporating, leaving only a terrified, petulant child. Olivia, please! My father begged, his eyes filling with tears. Honey, this is us. This is your family. You have to stop this. Tell them it's a mistake. Tell them you were practicing for your thesis. A mistake, I asked, looking at each of them. Was it a mistake when you forged my name, Dad? Was it a mistake when you called me a bookworm, Leo? Was it a misunderstanding when you told me I was boring and practical while you were spending my inheritance on a car, Mom? We can pay it back. Diana shrieked, all pretense of class gone. We'll sell the car. We'll sell the house. You can't, Mr. D'Angelo said, his voice bored. That's the civil part I mentioned. As of 9:15 this morning, all assets, the house, the LSE, all associated bank accounts, that Mercedes, all of it are frozen, seized. As collateral, they were gone. The money, the house, the foundation, everything. They weren't just arrested. They were broke. My father just sobbed, a horrible, wet, gulping sound. My mother was muttering, no, 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 over and over. Leo just stared at me, his eyes full of a new horrifying respect. You monster. No, Leo, I said. I'm just a numbers person. I'm just self-sufficient. Remember? I looked at my father, this broken, weeping man. You told me I'd figure it out, Dad. I straightened my suit jacket, and I did. I got a PhD. I exposed a federal frog ring, and I just got my first job offer. Dr. Graves stood up, placing a proud hand on my shoulder. Doctor, my last name, will be joining my old division at the FBI as a forensic consultant. It seems her dissertation was very practical. After all, I turned my back on them. The AUSA nodded to the marshal. The last thing I heard as the door opened was my mother's final desperate wail. Olivia, please, don't leave us. We're your family. I paused at the door. I looked back at the 3 of them, a perfect shattered portrait of greed and stupidity. My dissertation was peer-reviewed, I said. They called it a masterpiece of forensic discovery. And you're just the footnote. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. Dr. Graves held the door for me. I walked past the reception, past the elevators, and out onto the street, into the bright, clear Boston air. I took a deep breath. It was the first one that didn't taste like lies. I was free.